Guys, I'm actually streaming out of Birmingham today. I'm actually at the university campus at the University of Birmingham, as you can see over there. And I'm actually here to give a series of lectures on what would be called pragmatism in our development in Africa, and economic pragmatism in a way that does away with ideology and all of the whole ideological challenges we're having in our government. And this is really crucial because this is in light of the fact that, if you watch my interview with Nell de Beer, which I've actually did yesterday, but I think it hits the channel today. Nell de Beer actually also raises these issues with the ideologies that seem to have guided the ANC and seem to still be guiding the ANC today. And one thing that, if you listen to the interview fully, one thing that stands clear is that he tries to remind South Africans and everyone who is actually interested to understand the ANC that the ANC does not stand alone. The ANC is sort of like in a tripartite union with the South African Communist Party and COSATU, which is actually one of the strongest union, or probably one of the strongest unions in South Africa, which then constrains the capitalistic prowess that the ANC might wish to, impinge in its effort to ascertain, a kind of like a freestyle capitalist-based governance in South Africa. And so this is actually really crucial. And for me, it was a really light bulb moment during that interview where, I was able to really understand that one of the basic tenets of the ANC really is this drive for this whole push towards communism. And if it's really affiliated with the South African Communist Party, then I really don't know how, the entrepreneurs in South Africa have actually survived to do the big things they've been doing across Africa, bro. South Africa has, I think it's still the largest GDP per capita, a land of entrepreneurs, business people, bro. I've been meeting, South African entrepreneurs. And if South Africans in Edinburgh, in Birmingham, who would be willing to meet up or talk or something, please let me know in the comments, all right? Because I actually want to meet the South Africans in the UK who probably have left South Africa because of the fact that they feel that stifling environment in South Africa going forward. And one of the things that really hits me the most is this whole thing with a brain drain, all right? I'm here now, I'm giving presentations. I actually travel around the world trying to give presentations and talks about some of my research, especially the nuances between ideology and economic development. I saw that a lot in Ghana under the December 31st revolution, spearheaded by former President Jerry Rawlings. They came into power with a plan to really have an anti-imperialist socialist revolution in Ghana. But along the line in the 1980s thereabout, where we saw Thatcherism and Reaganomics, these are kind of like neoliberal terms that are used to describe the 1980s, where we saw a really interesting brand of neoliberalism launched in the world. Jerry Rawlings and the left-wing guys in the Provisional National Defense Council, PNDC government, they clashed because Jerry Rawlings thought that they only kept on propagating these empty theories, but there weren't really pragmatic means to really help Ghana out of the mess it was in the 1980s. And so he switched to the guys at the right, he switched to the technocrats, he switched to the IMF and the World Bank, although I'm not advising South Africa to switch to the IMF. But anyway, it was his pragmatic approach to really reject these theoretical things that we boggle our minds with in kind of like this left-wing economic style development. And if you one of the things that stands out for me is when I listen to the EFF, especially the last the kind of like the Congress they had anyway, there was a lot of theory about left-wing theories and the things about Fanonism, Marxism, and all of that. At the core of my research in Ghana, I found out that really people just really want to eat. People just want to be able to afford bread, okay? And so it's really tough on how to really balance capitalism and probably socialism, or this capitalist dogma and socialist, theoretical ways of approaching governance. It's really tough. But anyway, I'm really strained and worried about the brain drain, as you could hear from Neil Diamond about the South Africans who are expressing interest, to the United States. That's a massive brain drain. We saw that in Nigeria a lot. And the thing about Nigeria is really populated. Nigeria is densely populated, and the universities in Nigeria are quite, they're quite, in a way, appreciated. They're smart people in Nigeria. So despite the large number of Nigerians who have actually emigrated from Nigeria, somehow there's still a critical mass of brains in the land, you see. And so it appears as though the brain drain hasn't been felt that much. But in South Africa, bro, the situation is different. I showed you guys former statistician General Lehotla's analysis of the educational gap he sees among the people groups in South Africa. The whites and the Indians seem to be on a little bit higher par than the blacks and the coloreds. And the unfortunate thing is that the blacks and the coloreds represent the majority. So in other words, there hasn't been substantial investment in the education of this group, which is the majority. And now that we have the few, so to speak, that seem to be available, have been really, pushing forward in terms of, although I hear a lot of white South Africans argue that, man, they've been unemployed for a long time, there are no jobs and all of that, and so they are really victims of also the really harsh 33.3% unemployment rate that South Africa is actually measured to be under now. There's still that entity that, if harnessed properly, this group, which is actually still the educated, or probably you can find more highly educated South Africans among these groups, they could actually be of more help to help create that balance, you see. And then probably along the long run, on the long term, we could see what might be a straining out or balancing of the educational issues or the educational challenges we see among the people group. But no, now Neil Diamond is actually telling us that, as much as 67,042 South Africans, and these are Afrikaners, all right, because that's the specific groups that Trump actually I think made the executive order for. And so if you calculate, and I've been seeing in the comments, out of these 67,042 people, you calculate, and they say they have 2 to 3 dependents. And the odd thing about the whole thing is that they are the young people. These are not the old farmers or the old pensioners who probably want to leave South Africa. These are really the young people, kind of like the next generation kind of thing. So you imagine how much of a economic hit and shock that could actually impact on the economy going forward if we have this really massive amount of brain drain. And Gordon Gwanat is arguing now that he actually also tries to increase the VAT, value-added tax, so there's a necessity for taxpayers to be in the land. But now we see most of these guys running away. And the funny part is that the fact that if we do not wake up in Africa, we will keep on seeing a strengthening of the northern, or probably would I say western country, because you see in the UK here, I don't know, I can just show you guys quickly the campus where I am, the Edgbaston campus. You see how rich it is. A lot of students trying to really shuffle their way, kind of like getting to classes, developing their minds, developing their intellects. Most of these guys would actually from here go to work, part-time work for students, raise income for their lives and for their living and all of that. And you see, it's clear that development is something that, it's a no-brainer in this kind of region. And then we have the few minds who can actually help the continent, who can actually help the likes of South Africa, probably would now have to be emigrating to add to the richness and the wealth of the development in this place. So this is my problem with the leadership in Africa. Like, I really hope that they can really wake up and smell the coffee, retain the talents that can be retained in Africa, retain the talents that can be retained in South Africa, regardless of how little you might think their efforts are. But there has to be a sort of like a rethinking of the way we govern. I really don't know how else to say that, but we have to really rethink the way we govern, so that the diaspora, because we have a critical mass in the diaspora, critical mass of brains, that if they find a suitable environment, and the South Africans have been really, what's the word now? The South Africans have actually been even more. They've had more tenacity. The Nigerians do not really have the patience, all right, to withstand, the whole government mess. These guys, the Nigerians, are able to get into their own pockets. They're able to find means to really travel the world and try to, in what one of my favorite academics, Felwin Sarr, argues, travel to where they find their most profound, the locus of their most profound fecundity. In other words, the environment that helps them to produce the most out of their talent and their gifts and all of that. And Nigerians do not waste time with that. South Africans have actually been patient. But now with the call for Trump trying to now, the USA now probably trying to extract the best minds in South Africa. The UK might be doing the same. There's been a lot of South Africans move to Australia, all of that. We just keep on seeing a government that really doesn't seem to be interested in keeping the minds that can actually build the continent. And for me, it's really painful. It's really sad. But we just keep on have to try to keep on doing what we have to do. And I really would not reject or probably dissuade any South African who will be willing to travel to their loci or the locus, the location of where they find their most profound profundity, to give their best of their gifts and their talents, so that those gifts and talents wouldn't die. And if probably at some point, if the ANC or probably the government of the day wakes up and realizes the importance of young Africans to the development of the continent, then probably since they've actually had to leave to develop themselves, they could come back to give more. All right. But I'm really hoping that our government can actually wake up and take these messages to heart, that the young South Africans who might be leaving to the US, probably you might call it a refugees program, but at the end of the day, they might end up getting a US citizenship, providing more value to the US economy. And we might have an entirely, I really don't want to use the word Zimbabwe, but I've been seeing that a lot in your comments. But I really don't, I'm struggling to imagine a South Africa become another case of what happened in Zimbabwe. It's a struggle. I'm still struggling to see that scenario. But the more I'm studying South Africa on this channel, the more I'm beginning to understand the possibilities of that happening. But anyway, I don't know. These are some of my ramblings from the beautiful University of Birmingham here. I'll be giving a presentation in a few minutes. But I thought to just share some thoughts with you guys and share with me, what do you guys think about the whole brain drain coming to South Africa in the light and in the wake of the expressions of interest to the tune of 67,042 South Africans who have actually expressed interest to move to the US, despite whether or regardless of whether they will be refugees or whatever. They are fed up, they're tired, they just want to leave South Africa to get sane. Share your thoughts in the comments.